All right, finna go ahead and get it started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of Champ podcast. For today's episode 203, we're going to be discussing the biggest struggle in your 20s. For the people that do not know me, my name is Champ, and I help men build their foundation of masculinity. A few things I want to say before I'm going to get this episode started. Make sure you go and follow me on Twitch, TikTok, Rumble, and on Spotify as well at Life of a Champ podcast on every single platform. So, topic for today: the biggest or the most painful struggle in your 20s, right? Essentially, that's the concept of today's idea. Now, I want to before I go ahead and give you all the information that I have thought about when it comes to answering this specific question or responding to that specific statement. I want you to go ahead and let me know what you think is one of the most um painful let's just say painful positions in your 20s. Maybe like it can be many different things. Maybe it's um, struggling with um, struggling with partying or whatever it is. But I just want you to put whatever you believe to be the most painful experience in your 20s. I'm going to give you mine right now. So yeah, let's go ahead and get this started, man. A few things I want to say also before I go to get started. Make sure you go ahead and tap in with my YouTube Shorts as well as my YouTube clips. I'll be posting here more very soon, and yeah, tap in with those for sure. So, like I said, the most painful struggle in your 20s. What is this? What does this look like? To me, this looks like voluntary acts of maturing. I had seen a X post the other day where they were talking about this specific topic. What is the most painful struggle in your 20s? Right. That was the question, and they're like answer it within 4 words. So I was like, okay, let me think about this for a second. Taking my own personal experiences into account, and also taking into the experiences that I've observed so many people in their 20s also have, and I came down to the conclusion of this: the answer to that question is voluntary acts of maturing. What I see so often is there's people that are in their 20s, especially in their younger 20s, but I'm just going to say 20s in general. I feel like this, I'm sure you could at least see some people within acting these specific ways. And I'm sure I'll be saying this same thing when I'm 29, 30. When it comes to people's biggest struggle within their 20s. It's they refuse to grow up. And I do believe that if you're a man in your 20s, you need to grow up as fast as you can. And there's many different reasons that I believe that you must grow up as fast as you can, because here's the thing: the world is waiting for you to be great. Other people are waiting for you to be your best. And if you're not your best, and if you're simply slacking off, you're prolonging your progress within life. And I don't necessarily like that. I don't like to hear that. Obviously, there's certain things you're going to need to go through, certain struggles you're going to need to have. But the last thing that you want is for you to work against you. And that is what I believe so many 20-year-olds go ahead and do, is they put themselves in a position where they lack the maturity in certain aspects, and then they have to deal with the consequences of that lack of maturity. And then it's like, well, why is my life not going the way that I want it to go? And for the most part, it's because you're not taking on enough responsibility. You're not making enough sacrifices, and you're not maturing in certain aspects that would make your life better. So, within my own personal life, I'm 22. It has been a great experience for me to go ahead and adopt responsibilities and to take voluntary acts of maturing that I don't necessarily see many people even, and this can even extend outside of people in their 20s. I don't see many people making certain sacrifices or taking on voluntary acts of maturing. What I see all too often is a bunch of grown ass adults that are acting like children. They're pretty much just grown ass children. Is pretty much what it is. And the way that I say that, and the reason that I always have said that, is simply because I see them so often be very immature and refuse to grow up, and refuse to um, just be certain ways that I think adults should be. And I feel like when you get into your 40s, your 30s, 40s, and 50s, I feel like there's certain ways that if you just were acting those specific ways in your 20s, you're going to be much better off. But the reason why I believe I believe voluntary acts of maturing is the most painful thing and most painful struggle in your 20s is because we live in a world where you don't need to mature. You can get away without maturing. You can get away and prolong it for a pretty good amount of time without truly maturing in certain aspects of life. You don't really need to develop your character. You have the excuse of saying, "Oh, well, I'm young. I got plenty of time." But what if you didn't have plenty of time? What if you don't have plenty of time? But yet you're just spending all your time, spending all of what could be some of the best years of your life and what should be some of the best years of your life just messing around. When you could be taking voluntary acts of maturing that will lead you to a better life quicker, that will get you to where you want to go quicker, to avoid you from so many stupid mistakes that most people make within their 20s. And like I mentioned, right, we live in a world where it's literally okay and it's almost celebrated for a person to go ahead and live up their 20s whatever way they would like, when in reality, if you were to just adopt more responsibility, mature a lot quicker, your life is going to be better. It's not going to necessarily be easier. It's definitely not going to be easier. And within my own personal experience of taking plenty of voluntary acts of maturing, I don't necessarily think that it's a easy thing. But at the same time, it's the most meaningful and the most fulfilling thing that you possibly can do, because you're making, if you're taking voluntary acts of maturity, you are thinking long term on every single aspect of your life, from the partner that you choose, to the career that you go into, to the endeavors and skills that you develop. These are all things that if you're planning, not like most people they plan in weeks, they plan in months. If you're planning in decades in your 20s, you're going to win in the long run. Everybody knows this, but yet, and especially a lot of people in their 20s, they kind of know this, but they still just push it off. They still want to act in these immature ways, like it's going to reap them the benefits that they truly should want and should desire. And I'll give you a few examples. I see a lot of people within their 20s, you're 18, 19, you're 20, you're in your early 20s, right? Your body's looking good, right? Your body's looking really good. You don't even necessarily have to put in that much work, and you just look good because, quite frankly, um you're just young, so your body's super healthy, whatever, right? And then you see some people when they get into their mid 20s, right? They feel like they didn't need to develop any self-discipline or physical competence, right? They didn't develop their body. They were kind of just getting away with genetics, or kind of getting away with, just being young and having a young looking body. And when you start to see people not take those voluntary acts of maturing, which is going to look like developing your self-discipline physically, right? Developing that physical competence, right? Working on your body, right? When you see people not prioritize that and not adopt that responsibility and not take that act of maturity, which is self-discipline, right? You start to see them slack off in that area of life, and that almost bleeds into almost every single aspect of their life. And of course, I'm not saying that's going to be it for everybody, right? I do believe, like I said many times, if you're going to make sacrifices, if you're going to act maturely, right? Sacrificing the best moment for a better moment in the future, right? This is something that so many people are refusing to go ahead and do, because it's almost like they don't know how to think critically. They don't understand that this game is a long game. If you're playing it right, this game is a long game. And they just lack so much of what I deem to be an essential parts to a fulfilled human being, which is of the highest reward, even above you prioritizing your happiness right now. There's so many people in their 20s that are misguided because they prioritize happiness and, oh, what are we doing next weekend? How can we have the best time that we possibly can? Instead of saying, what work can I put in right now that in 10 years is going to pay off more than any person around me? You asking and answering that question is super important, right? What is going to bring me fulfillment? What partner could I choose? What is the partner that I look like? What is the partner that I want and I know that I would want to keep truly look like? And if I found it right now, am I even able to handle that level of maturity? Am I even able to be up to par with that level of maturity, or am I not? Right? And of course, a lot of people, they would say, "Oh, probably not. There's no way I'm mature enough to handle something that's going to give me the most fulfilling moments of my entire life. I'm not ready. I'm not mature enough for that." It's like you're really prolonging. You're really not developing that side of yourself that is going to be one of the biggest elements of your entire life. Why are you not preparing yourself, right? I've always asked questions when I've observed some people, right? What are you doing? What else could you be doing that is better than pursuing that, or pursuing any of these things that I'm mentioning, these acts of maturity that so many people, like I said, they push off. Oh, next year, in 5 years, in 10 years, I'll worry about it. Worry about it right now. Think about it right now. Plan it out right now. Because quite frankly, life gets harder. That's what people don't understand is if you don't take voluntary acts of maturing in your 20s, life is only going to get harder. Your responsibilities are just going to stack up that are going to be outside of the ones that are going to give you the most fulfillment, right? They're going to be There's going to be responsibilities that might even be out of your control by the time you start to try to answer some of these questions or act in some of these ways when it comes to taking these voluntary acts of maturing. So, I think it's very, very important to think critically. I think it's very, very interesting that a lot of people don't ask themselves enough questions and they don't seek out the answers and they don't seek out the meaning within those answers, and they truly think that they can just get away with it. I think it's very, very funny, and I see it all too often. And of course, like I had mentioned, it's going to catch up with you. Your later years in life, if you refuse to answer life's questions, life's most important questions, you're gonna hinder certain aspects of your life. You're going to be having certain life crises that you can't even begin to imagine having to deal with, on top of all the other baggage that I've mentioned with adopting more responsibility and taking those voluntary acts of maturing. It's just going to stack up and it's going to be super overwhelming, and hopefully you're able to handle it. But here's the thing: if you're taking on more responsibility and making sure that you're voluntarily taking acts of maturity at a young age, now imagine the type of character that you would be 25, 30. Imagine the type of character you'd be 40 years old. Imagine the development that would take place. Let's just say it's something that you don't even believe that you can do. Right? This has been one of the most interesting experiences that I've ever experienced myself. There's certain things that I've done up until this point when it comes to taking these voluntary acts of maturity that I know that I might be a little bit underprepared for. But I have thought about them and I have recognized clearly it is the most meaningful and fulfilling thing that I possibly can do. And regardless of all the struggle that I would endure right now, taking it on as a 20-year-old, right, or in my 20s, right, it is much more rewarding, and I would much rather have those problems of the voluntary acts of maturing than I would to go ahead and delay those eventual acts of maturity that I would need to take. So even though it might be difficult, anything worth having in this life is going to be difficult anyways. Now you just have to ask yourself the question: do I want to deal with it now? Am I prepared to deal with it now, or am I choosing to deal with it later? Because quite frankly, if you want to live the best life you possibly can, you're going to need to develop that side of yourself anyways. So you might as well do it now, because what do you have to lose? And that is an interesting thing, right? What do you have to lose? Let me answer that for you. What you have to lose is missing out on certain experiences that people pedestalize very, very much at a young age. Let's just say, I'll give you a few examples, right? Going out on weekends all the time, every weekend, going out and hanging out with a bunch of people who are drinking and doing all types of drugs and living life up, right? And of course, I go out time and time again, right? I don't do too often like I see a lot of people do. And I do believe that you do need to go ahead and find a balance that's going to it's going to be appropriate for your level of maturity, right? And the maturity that you're trying to adopt. But at the same time, it's like, don't why would you overdo anything that feels really, really good? It's never a good idea. And here's the thing: if anybody tries to convince you that it's a good idea, you probably shouldn't be taking advice from that person in the first place. So I'll give you another example, right? Another example where people avoid themselves from maturity. It's going to look like sleeping around. The people who say, "Oh yeah, I have a good time. I go ahead and sleep around all the time. I have a bunch of women. I have a bunch of men. Whether it's men or whether it's women, there's going to be certain people. Hold up. There's going to be certain people that will try to convince you that these things are going to be of the highest value, when in reality, we all know it's not of the highest value. It might sound good. It might feel good. It might be entertaining. It might be exciting. But at the same time, what would it all be for? At the end of the day, if you had to analyze this, and this is what I had to do within my own life, right? If you're sleeping around with a bunch of people, what is it all for? And the answer is hopefully to hopefully find somebody that's worth stopping that behavior and start developing a certain character that is going to be better than just having these short-term interactions. And of course, like I said, I've had plenty of short-term interactions with people, but at the same time, I understood thoroughly that there was something better than this, and I asked myself the question, what is this all for? And it's all to find somebody that's going to demand more from you, so you can demand more from yourself. And that's what it is at the end of the day. And of course, a lot of people my age are unwilling to go ahead and take those voluntary acts of maturing. But I do believe that those voluntary acts of maturing is worth the character development and is worth every ounce of struggle that will be had within those moments. And here's the thing. Let's just say you try to take on one of these voluntary acts of maturing and it doesn't go good. You're not mature enough to handle it, right? That is fine. At least you tried. At least you tried and you strived for what is the best for you in the long term. And here's the thing, at the end of the day, at least you could say that. Now, I do believe that if you're taking these voluntary acts of maturing, there's going to be some decisions that you need to just stick with, whether you want to go ahead and do it or not. There's certain maturing acts that you must completely adopt and attach to your identity because it's going to be better for you in the long term. And there's a lot of people who are not willing to go ahead and do that. It's too demanding. It's too hard. Why would I do that when I could just have a good time? Why would I do that when, you know, I don't need to do that? And it's because, and I like it, and the way that I would answer that is because you still need to do that. There's no point in delaying it. There's no point of pushing it off because when you're pushing it off, you're still going to handle it. You're just going to be a little bit more underprepared. Think about this, right? Let's just say you attempted to go ahead and act voluntarily to those acts of maturity, right? And let's just say you tried it and you tried it a few times and you still couldn't do it, right? What makes you think at 30 or however whatever age when you decide to go ahead and develop this side of yourself that you're going to be better off? What's really convincing you that you're going to be better off? That time has passed by? But here's the thing, if the character evolution hasn't taken place, it hasn't taken place. There's certain people that just think that these certain life categories. This is the way that I break it up within my own mind, right? There's a bunch of different life categories, right? That somehow, some way, over time, you're just gonna be able to accomplish and do it at the highest level and be exactly who you thought you were going to be. But they lack the character development. They lack certain aspects that are of the utmost importance, and then just expect that it's all going to fall into place like that's ever happened ever. That's not how this life works, man. And I find it very very funny, right? So I'll give you an example, right? Once you figure out the simple realities of life, like I keep going back to this example because this example is so good with sleeping around. Once you understand truly that do you want to do this for the rest of your life? Is it even practical to do this for the rest of my life? And the answer is no, obviously. It's not sustainable. It's not fulfilling, right? Once you figure that out, you begin to understand thoroughly that there is better solutions to these problems, right? That you give yourself. And that's what most people don't understand is by you not taking on these voluntary acts of maturing, you're dealing with problems that you potentially don't even need to go ahead and deal with. And I think that's super super funny. Cuz that's what I recognize within myself, right? Before I had a girlfriend, I had known thoroughly that if I'm going to look for a partner, and if I found a person and decided to go ahead and neglect that person, if I found a person that was fulfilling all the things that I would need in a partner, right? And I was still neglecting that, that is the dumbest thing that I could do because quite frankly, I would be choosing to go ahead and deal with problems that I didn't even have to deal with in the first place. And that's dumb. And that's what I would say a lot of people do within their 20s is they deal with a lot of problems that they don't even have to deal with. Once you figure out certain pieces to the puzzle, right? You don't need to deal with problems just because you're young, just because you have time, just because you can void yourself from responsibility. It's ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous. What it comes down to it is this. Everybody in life is looking for clarity, right? And there's going to be certain things that you do that you can do, certain questions that you can answer, and certain aspects that you can work on that are going to bring you this clarity. And I would like to give you a few of those because I do believe that these are going to be the most important things that you need to focus in on. And if you're lacking focus or lacking the voluntary action um, of maturity within answering these questions, you're just going to push off problems. You're going to extend the period of time that you have these problems instead of taking it on. Let's just say in the next 2 years you chose this one category, one of many categories of life, one of the things that I'll mention, right? And you decided to battle all the problems that you can have within this period of time, as opposed to, let's just say you're prolonging you taking on this voluntary acts of maturity, right? And now you still have this problem because you don't have this part of your character developed, right? You don't have this part of fulfillment that a human needs, right? And you decide to push it off, right? So now you extend the length of time that these problems will exist. And no one wants to deal with problems. No one likes problems, but here's the thing, you must fix the problems that you do have. In refusing to fix the problems that you know you have is not taking a voluntary act of maturing. You're pushing off and extending problems. I think that's absolutely goofy, and people do it all too often. Um, but yes, you want to be very, very clear with what you find to be of the absolute most importance. What do you value within this time right now? What do you recognize that other people value, right? And you must have intended focus when you go ahead and approach these certain aspects of your life. Because if you have an intended focus, it should allow for your best self to go ahead and manifest. So I'll give you a few of these examples that I do believe that if you truly have intended focus, your best self is going to manifest. These are going to be things like finding out your purpose, right? What are you here for? What is this? What is this life all for? What are you supposed to be doing? How are you supposed to be acting, and why? Right? Answering all these questions when it comes to finding your purpose is going to be absolutely essential to the ways in which you would like to move within this life. Because quite frankly, if you don't have a purpose, when you fall off, you're really going to fall off. Because you have no structure, you have no foundation, you have nothing to rely on, you have nothing to look back on that is of absolute meaning and importance to you. The second you find your purpose, and obviously this is going to be something that, it might take a little bit longer for you, maybe it won't, maybe it will. But nonetheless, taking the voluntary act of maturing when it comes to finding out your purpose is to be on the constant search for your purpose, or to be fulfilling your purpose, to be recognizing all the different ways in which you can fulfill your purpose. That is a huge thing that I have been doing and that I will continue to do, because I recognize at an early age that this is what I'm called to do. This is what I'm here to do. This is what I can do best. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll let you know my purpose, right? My purpose is to inspire, empower, and educate the ones around me and of my influence, and to pretty much help them be their best self, and to help them help themselves, more importantly, right? To get the right message to the right person at the right time is what I like to say. And you can kind of structure your life in that way when you have that answered, right? You no longer have to answer a question. You no longer have to answer a question that a lot of people don't even question to find the answer to, if that makes any sense, right? So just that one act of voluntary maturing it's going to change your life, as it's changed my life. It has redirected my focus. It has gave me more intent to live with, and that's very important. So another one of these things. Give me 1 second. All right. The next voluntary acts of maturing that I would recommend that you go ahead and take on, this is going to be approaching life and understanding that there's going to be certain questions that you can ask yourself that will reap you the reward of clarity. So, by analyzing people's characters, this is how I personally went about this, right? By analyzing people's characters that I would like to be like. What what could I assume the question that they ask themselves in order to develop the side of that character that I truly admire? And here's the thing, a lot of those people will probably have clarity in certain aspects of life that you probably don't have clarity within right now, and that is completely fine. But what question do you think they ask themselves in order to get that level of clarity? It could be many different things. Maybe it was, what is my purpose? And then they started living it out. Obviously, that's one example, but understand that there's going to be plenty of questions that if you do answer, you will get much more than most people get out of this life. There's plenty of questions that I have asked myself that when I move within the world, I can just recognize that there's certain people that just haven't answered these questions. For example, I'll give you another one, which is one of the ones that I mentioned earlier, right? If you had an ideal partner, what would their character look like? And just brainstorm. How do you expect to get what you want out of this life when you don't even know what you want? You haven't answered the question to what you want in this certain category of life. How are you expecting to just stumble upon the life that you want if you're not willing to ask the question and answer the question that is going to allow you to have that clarity within yourself to actually know what the hell you're looking for? Most people just try to figure it out on the way there, man. And quite frankly, that is not a good enough plan in order to get what you want to get out of this life. You're not going to just figure it out unless you actually sit down with yourself and ask yourself questions to go ahead and figure it out. It's a very, very big misconception that I see all too often that people go ahead and um, approach life with. It's not a very, very smart thing to go ahead and do. So I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. So yes, you need to ask yourself questions. What questions can you ask yourself that are going to reap you the most clarity? So, and another thing with this, right? What another question you can ask yourself is, what questions can I ask myself if I wanted to get to know somebody and get to know the best parts of them? Those are the same questions that you should be asking yourself, right? And like I said, at the end of the day, you're just looking for clarity. This world is a very, very blurry world. It is very, very confusing. There's a lot of things that are trying to distract you and are trying to take away your attention and your focus, right? In a world filled with all those things, it is within your best interest to try to seek out clarity. Clarity through answering questions that are the most important questions that one must ask and answer. 100%. You need to go ahead and develop that. You need to go ahead and develop that side of yourself, that self-reflective, that self-awareness, and you do that by asking questions, right? Getting into the next one, the act of maturity, the voluntary act of maturity that is going to get you to where you want to go is going to look like adopting and recognizing skills that are worth having, right? Any person that you admire, they have adopted and recognized skills that are worth having. So with that being said, when I go ahead and give you that suggestion, ask yourself the question: what are skills that are worth having? What are skills that I recognize within other people that I say, man, that is one hell of a skill. I would like to be like that. I would like to develop my character in that way. That seems like it would be a cool life to live, right? What are the skills worth adopting? And what skills do you recognize that are worth having? For me, for example, one of the skills that I wanted to go ahead and develop was being able to speak publicly, right? And the way that I would do that is by developing my speech over a podcast, being articulate, being able to collect my ideas, my words, and my thoughts, and bringing it into the real world through speech, right? That was one of my things that I believe to be a skill that I observed within other people that I thought was absolutely fantastic, whether it was a comedian, whether it was a musician, whether it was a motivational speaker, whatever it was. I'm like, holy shit, man, I would love to be like that. I would love to develop that side of myself. And quite frankly, It is something that I've developed over the last 3 years and something that I will continue to develop because I've recognized that it was a skill worth having. So, with that being said, within your own life, what are skills that are worth having? And by you adopting these skills or being in the process of adopting these skills, that is taking that voluntary act of maturity that I've been talking about that I would say is the should be the most painful struggle of your 20s. Now, quite frankly, within all these things that I mentioned, right, you're gonna be a beginner at all these things if you're not already advanced, right? And that's going to be a lot of pain. This is the pain that I'm talking about, right? Pain of finding out your purpose, pain of, you know, trying to figure out what questions are the best questions to ask oneself, right? Being able to, the pain of trying to figure out what skills that you want to go ahead and develop, and also understanding that you're going to be pretty trash at that skill in the first place. But obviously, everyone was trash when they first started, right? So, with that being said, those are going to be some of the voluntary acts of maturing that I've mentioned so far. Moving on, this is going to go hand in hand with asking questions, but I feel like this is going to be a little bit more of an intended focus on this one category of life, right? This next one, the next voluntary act of maturity that I would recommend that you go ahead and take on is understand that you must constantly evolve your identity by taking on more responsibility, right? There's going to be a certain identity that you carry right now that you must recognize within yourself, right? You must define and clarify what this specific identity that you're upholding, how they act, how they move, what they like to do, what they choose to do, what they're willing to sacrifice, the responsibilities that they're taking on. And within all that, you must constantly seek out evolution within that identity. It is absolutely paramount that you seek out that you understand that this game is just evolving your identity. That's all it is. If you want to level up in this game of life, find out where you are right now, find out where you want to be, and obviously take the steps forward to go ahead and try to be that person, right? And you do that for the most part by taking on more responsibility and also by um, developing your character in a way where you're taking voluntary acts of maturing. That is going to be one of them, right? Getting into the next one, another one that is I can't overstate this enough. The next voluntary act of maturing that I would recommend for you to go ahead and take, this is going to be looking like seeking out fulfilling work. Seeking out fulfilling work, seeking out meaningful work. You see it all too often that there's a lot of people who are in their 20s that are quite frankly doing something or chose a path that they don't really give a shit about, right? You've chose a job that you really don't care about, that you're going to need 40, 50 years to go ahead and retire from, right? And you chose this because you were pressured into go ahead and developing this side of yourself because you didn't exactly have all the answers all figured out. You never asked yourself the questions that were going to bring the clarity, and you just had found yourself in this position of life trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and then you recognize all too late, which is not really too late, that it's probably the wrong thing. You don't really want to do this for the rest of your life. And with that being said, most people that exist within this world, unfortunately, are doing meaningless work. When I say meaningless work, I say work that they don't care for, right? Work that if they were fired from, they would easily get replaced. Work that if that work that if that job stopped paying them, they wouldn't even do it in the first place, right? They would have no interest in doing it, right? And I feel like there's not enough people that talk about that, right? A lot of people with their jobs, they don't give a shit. They just act like they do. And I feel like this is one of the most normalized things that is probably the dumbest thing that I've ever recognized within society is go to an average job, right? Go to a store real quick, right? You think anybody in that fucking building really gives a shit about that job? For the most part, no. They all put on this facade like they give a shit. When no one really cares. No one cares about the work that they're doing. They're just simply doing it for a paycheck. They want it they want it to convenience their life and that's it. But here's the thing. I would say that is the ultimate inconvenience of it all. That is the ultimate inconvenience of your life is doing work you don't give a fuck about and not seeking out meaningful work, right? Not asking yourself the questions and not putting yourself in a position to go ahead and make money from the meaningful work that you go ahead and choose. So that is one thing that I would say is of absolute paramount importance when it comes to the voluntary acts of maturing within your 20s. You must seek out meaningful work. What is something that you would do even if you didn't get paid for it? Figure that out for yourself. How can you build a career off of this? In a world filled with so many endless opportunities right now, what is something that you can go ahead and take? What are skills that you need to go ahead and develop in order to seek out the meaningful work that will get you paid for doing something that you truly love doing? That truly means something to you, that is truly fulfilling to you in your life. And the alternative is the alternative that I described already. So you have no other fucking option than to try to choose something that is going to be worth meaning. Because if not, you're choosing a path that most people have chosen, and that path is the one of the most undesirable human existences that I've ever witnessed. And I don't understand why people settle for that lifestyle. That is not a lifestyle that I would recommend for my worst enemy, quite frankly. And um, it's all too normalized. Not enough people are talking about that. You can in this day and age of endless opportunity, you can be who you want to be. You can do what you want to do if you develop the skills, if you understand what meaningful work looks like, if you decide to take on that character evolution, you can be whoever you want to be. And I'm not saying that just to sound good. I'm saying that because I'm in the process of doing that right now. And I've seen so many people, and as you have seen so many people who are probably dumber than you doing things that you wish you could do. And that's what it is at the end of the day. Why not you? Ask yourself that question. Why not me? Why can't I do meaningful work? Why do I have to be another person who's doing work they don't give a shit about? Or can you be the person that does work that is truly meaningful to them, that is truly going to fulfill them, that they're doing work that, like I said, if you stop getting paid for, you would still do it anyways. That is the highest thing that anyone should strive for within this life. And if you're not striving for that, you've settled for the lowest amount of fulfillment and happiness within a category of your life that is going to consume 1/3 of your time. That is not a very wise decision. So find out what that is. Seek out meaningful work, right? Like I said, it's a voluntary act of maturity when you seek out meaningful work. A lot of people haven't done it. If you look at the people that have done it and have been successful within that, right? They live some of the most meaningful existences that anyone could ever live. They're doing what they love to do. Don't you want to do what you love to do and get paid for doing it? Figure out how to do that, man. There's a lot of people doing dumb shit all the time and getting paid for it, man. They're getting paid for you. They're getting paid to do some dumbass work that you understand is pretty stupid, but they're getting paid to do it, and they're living a better existence because they've just decided to go ahead and dedicate themselves, right? That's meaningful to them, so that's what they go ahead and do, right? But yes, another thing that I will mention when it comes to this is actually going to be a two-part one, right? When it comes to taking voluntary acts of maturity, you must understand thoroughly that building a network of deep, meaningful people is going to be a level of maturity that one must strive for. And with that being said, the counterpart to that is going to look like getting rid of people who are not meaningful and who are not deep. When I say deep, I mean deep intellectually speaking, or deep character speaking, right? Where they have a very very um, they have a very very important character to themselves, right? Um, and with that being said, or let's just say valuable character within themselves, right? I do believe that it is of absolute paramount importance for you to seek out deep and meaningful people, right? Living a life filled with people who are the opposite of that, right? Meaningless and shallow, right? No one wants to live that existence. And I do believe it is your responsibility to go ahead and take that voluntary act of maturing to go ahead and seek out those people that are going to be within your life that hopefully you would want to have within your life, right? Not enough people have those type of people within their life, and then they wonder why they're running into problems and dealing with shit people. When in reality, like I said, I would much rather have nobody than to have somebody who's shallow and meaningless. I'd rather have nobody, right? And you should refuse anyone who's going to try to give you that opportunity, right? If they're shallow and meaningless, you're better off without them. So if you have people right now within your life that you deep down understand thoroughly that they're shallow and they're meaningless to you in your life and your development, it's probably going to be within your best interest to not even have them within your life at all. Seek out meaningful people. Seek out people, um, and build a network of deep and meaningful people. Right? There's really no alternative, and there's really nothing else that is worth doing within this life, in my opinion, than to develop yourself and develop other people's character by seeking out those type of people. Those are going to be the people that you want to be around, people that you want to be like, and it is within your best interest to find is to find and build a network of those people for sure, right? All right, I'm gonna give you a few more of these voluntary acts of maturity that for the most part are painful to make. Quite frankly, painful to go ahead and make, but nonetheless, if you don't make it now, you're probably gonna need to make it in the future, and if you don't make it in the future, then you're probably going to be living a very painful existence, and quite frankly, you're going to live a painful existence regardless. So you might as well at least take a voluntary act of maturing and take on that pain that way. Because if not, you're going to be voiding yourself from a life. You're going to be voiding yourself from a life of maturity and dealing with the pain that will reap. You might be convincing. The most painful thing that I've ever seen anyone do is to convince themselves that they're living a good and happy life when we all know deep down that they're not living a good and happy life, and they're not living a meaningful existence, yet they try to convince themselves and rationalize their behaviors by saying, "Oh yeah, I'm having a good time." Are you really having a good time? Because I know deep down at night, on those lonely, dark nights, that shit hurts and it is painful and it is meaningless. And here's the thing: you can live a painful and meaningless life, or you can live a painful and meaningful life. Which one would you rather have? And the way that you're going to have, obviously, the better option of those two is by taking on these voluntary acts of maturity that I've been mentioning all throughout this podcast. Give me one second. All right. Getting into the next one, the next voluntary act of maturity that I would recommend for every single person to go ahead and make in every single aspect of their life. This is going to look like making sacrifices that you never thought that you could make, right? So if there's something that you see or perceive to be, let's just say, of high value, right? You value this very, very much, and you kind of see within yourself that in order to have that, you'd have to do a lot of character development, and maybe you're almost not even ready to go ahead and do that, right? Or maybe you're not really ready to go ahead and make that sacrifice and stop doing that, right? But here's the thing: you understand thoroughly that you admire that behavior within other people, and it is intriguing to you. Truly, it is. Figure it out, man. That's what I'd say. Figure it out. Get it done somehow. Do it, even if it's hard. Try it. You might as well try it. You ain't got nothing else to lose, man. If you're in your 20s, you got nothing. You got nothing to lose, brother. You might as well make the sacrifice. You might as well go ahead and give it a shot. Because quite frankly, you have nothing to lose at this point in time. The only thing you have to lose is time, and that is one hell of a loss, right? And we all know this, but yet a lot of people they don't want to take those voluntary acts of maturity, which is going to look like making sacrifices, and then they lose out on one of the most painful things to lose out on, which is time. So, with that being said, understand that there are certain sacrifices that you might recognize that you never thought you could make. There's certain things that you do right now that you never thought you could live without. There's certain ways and identities that you have and habits that you hold on to that you maybe never thought you could really get rid of. And let's just say you perceive any of these things to be bad. You can get rid of it. You can sacrifice it. You can do it even if it's painful, right? I've done it time and time again. There's certain sacrifices that I didn't necessarily think that I could make. I didn't think I was ready for. But here's the thing: at the end of the day, if you view it to be of importance in any capacity, you should at least try to go ahead and do that. Try it, just try it out, man. Regardless of at the very least, if you're truly not ready for it, at least you'll confirm it with yourself instead of just living in this lie of saying, I probably can't do it. Right? I don't like to live within that. Right? I like to fuck around and find out, can I handle it or can I not handle it? And if I can handle it, fantastic. If it's hard and I can handle it, it's gonna develop my character probably for the best. Right? And here's the thing: if it's hard and I can't handle it, at least I understood where I am, and instead of just giving myself this illusion of where I think that I am. Right? So figure it out for yourself. Right? Understand that there are certain sacrifices that you're going to need to make in order to get to the next level in life, to take on this next identity, to take on this new skill, to develop this new purpose and to do meaningful work, right? Figure out that sacrifice, even if you believe that it would be very, very hard to go ahead and make, give it a shot. You might as well give it a shot. Like I said, the only thing you have to lose is time. And I know you value your time, so you don't want to lose that, brother. I know you don't want to lose that. Getting into the next one, I'm gonna give you a few more examples of voluntary acts of maturity that I would recommend that everyone takes on this when you're watching this podcast, right? The foundation of the idea is this: you must commit to something. This is going to be a painful, painful thing when it comes to maturing, but make a decision. Commit to something. So many people don't commit to anything. They don't commit to the person. They don't commit to a person. They don't commit to a partner, right? They don't commit to a cause. They don't commit themselves. They don't commit themselves to themselves, right? And they don't commit themselves to their potential. And that's what it is at the end of the day. A lot of people don't commit to anything at all. But here's the thing: all the people that they admire have committed to something. And if you want to be anything like those people that you admire, then you must commit to something. Commit to meaningful work. Commit to a partner. Commit to having kids. Commit to choosing freedom. Commit to sticking within your values. Commit to sticking up for your morals, right? Commit to something. Because here's the thing: the worst thing that anyone could do is commit to nothing. Because here's the thing: they didn't even commit to themselves. They didn't even commit to their potential. And now they have to live with that. Now they have to understand that that is going to be the character that is going to be is a commitless person. And no one should want to be that. That is a very, very selfish existence. To commit to nothing is to commit to failure. Is to commit to your own demise, really. And that's what it is at the end of the day. And with all these things that I've mentioned, within all the voluntary acts of maturity that I would recommend for you to go ahead and take, I want you to thoroughly look at the faults of that people have within their 20s. Do you believe that people within their 20s are truly taking enough voluntary acts of maturing, or are they not? And I would say, of course, you know my take on this. Of course not. So with that being said, when you recognize all of these people, maybe it's something that I haven't mentioned, right? Look at the faults of the people within their 20s. This is something that you should do all the time, right? Before you get there, look at the routes that the people have taken when they were in the same position that you're in right now. Look at the routes that they've taken, and look at all the problems that one could run themselves into. If you don't want to be like that, if you don't want to look like that, if you don't want to be like that, if you don't want to act like that, if you don't want to associate with that, it's probably going to be within your best interest to go ahead and adopt more responsibility, to take on more sacrifices, to take on more voluntary acts of maturing. That's going to be the best answer for most people's lives. And if you've taken anything from this podcast, I want you to go and leave in the comments. I would much appreciate that, for damn sure. But other than that, I've pretty much said everything I needed to say for today's episode, man. All I have to say is this: the biggest and most painful experience and struggle within a person within their 20s is going to be taking voluntary acts of maturing. There's not enough people that take these acts, and if you're a person that is, avoiding yourself from taking these voluntary acts of maturing, just know that life's going to mature you in a way anyways, and it truly might not be within your best interest, and it truly might be forced. And if you refuse to go ahead and take on these voluntary acts of maturing, just know that life is going to come with plenty and plenty of more baggage that you can't even begin to imagine. And the less answers that you have, the less questions you ask, the less answers you will have, and the less answers that you have, the less clarity that you will have, and the less clarity that you will have, the more struggle that you will have. And that's what it is at the end of the day. So I'll leave you guys off with the podcast motto, or before that, this is episode 203 of the Life of a Champ podcast, talking about the most painful struggle that people have within their 20s. I'll leave you guys off with the podcast motto. Fellas out here, we don't just work around here, man. We outwork. So make sure you outwork with these motherfuckers, because you know that I am. If you want one-on-one coaching with me, please contact me on any social media, and I will go ahead and set something up for you. Like I said, if there's anything that you've taken from this podcast and want to go ahead and apply, or you thought was good advice, feel free to leave it in the comments. Also, tap in with the next podcast that's going to be on next Thursday for sure. And also, if there's any videos or creators that you want me to go ahead and react to on next Monday, tap in with that for sure. I like to go live and react to some videos, so tap in with that as well. Other than that, I've said everything I needed to say, man. You already know what time it is, man. Y'all have a good night, and tap in with the next podcast on Thursday.